Every leader reaches a moment when they realize the role they've been carrying is coming to an end. And a quiet fear rises. If I let go of this, will I still matter? This is the myth of the endpoint. The belief that stepping out of a role means stepping out of relevance. Welcome back to the Leadership Longevity Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Hughes, and we are deep inside Survival Driver 3, the transition distortion pattern. In Myth 8, we explored disruption, the moment the old identity loosens. Today, we explore what happens next. The fear that when something ends, you end with it. This myth is not about disruption. It's not about identity erasure. It's about influence and just the fear of losing it. Inside the leadership longevity ecosystem, myth 9 sits at the center of the identity layer. So if myth 8 destabilizes identity, myth 9 destabilizes continuity, your sense of mattering, your sense of contribution, your sense of being part of the system. When the identity layer is in transition, your influence sort of feels fragile. And that's when this myth takes hold. If I step out of this role, my influence ends. But here's the truth: roles end, influence doesn't. The myth of the end point tells you if I step away, I'll lose my influence. If I'm not in the role, I'm not valuable. If I'm not leading this, I'm disappearing. But influence is not positional, influence is relational. Roles end, identities evolve, influence continues. Here's where this myth shows up. In every transition that asks you to loosen one identity before the next one has fully formed. So, say stepping up. When your scope expands and you move further from the work, you fear losing that influence that came from the proximity, from being the one who knew, the one who held, who anchored. Stepping across. So, when you shift into a new domain or portfolio, you fear losing the credibility you built in the old one, as if influence can't travel sideways. Stepping out. So when a chapter ends, succession, redesign, moving on, you fear becoming irrelevant, as though your influence lived inside the role instead of inside of you. Stepping back. When you intentionally reduce scope or choose a season of less intensity, you fear others will see it as a decline instead of an evolution, as if influence only moves upward. And then we have stepping back in. When you return from time away, be it parenting, illness, caregiving, recovery, recalibration, you fear you've lost your place in the system, that the version of you who left is the only one people will recognize. And beneath all of these transitions is the same quiet fear. Will I still matter when I'm no longer the one holding this? This isn't about ego. It's not about control. It's about continuity. Your deep human need to feel that your presence still shapes the system, even when your role changes shape. This myth is seductive because our roles give us clarity, authority, access, visibility. And when a role ends, it can feel like all of that is at risk. So we cling, we overfunction, we hold on long after the role has stopped holding us. Not because we're controlling, but because we're afraid of losing our voice. There's a leader, you've met versions of them everywhere, who built a team from the ground up. They were the anchor, the one people came to, the one who held the history, the relationships, the rhythm. After a restructure, their role shifted. A new leader would take on the team. They would move to a more strategic role. Everyone congratulated them. Great opportunity, perfect timing. You've earned this. But inside, they felt something else. Will I still matter? In the months that followed, something unexpected happened. The team didn't collapse, they grew. The new leader brought fresh energy, new ideas, new rhythms. And the leader who stepped out, they found themselves influencing in a different way, not through authority, but through perspective, not through proximity to the work, but through wisdom, not through being essential, but through being expansive. Their influence didn't end, it evolved. And in that evolution, they discovered something they hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from being the bottleneck, freedom from being the anchor, freedom from being the one who had always had to hold everything. Their role ended, their influence didn't. It simply changed shape. And here's the part that matters. What feels like loss is often the beginning of expansion. So let's ground this in science. Modern identity research shows that when a role ends, your identity doesn't collapse, it reorganizes. Transitions create a temporary identity gap where the old role no longer defines you, but the new one hasn't fully formed. It feels like loss, but it's actually a growth window. Stepping in, stepping up, or stepping out loosens rigid self definitions and activates new capacities. Your influence doesn't end here, it changes shape. Leadership research also shows that influence now travels through trust, credibility, perspective, and presence, not job titles. So when you step in, you influence through curiosity and fresh eyes. When you step up, you influence through clarity and pattern recognition. And when you step out, you influence through wisdom, mentorship, and legacy. Your influence becomes broader, not smaller, when it becomes less tied to position. So, meaning then increases when contribution becomes more flexible. When we're talking about purpose research, then, that shows us that people experience the highest levels of meaning when their contribution evolves. Transitions create space for new forms of purpose, new ways to shape people, systems, and futures. Stepping out of a role often reveals the deeper story of your leadership because your contribution was never the role, it was you. Your role ends, your influence doesn't. Influence is not tied to a title, it's tied to who you are, how you show up, and the way you shape the people and systems around you. Transitions don't diminish you, they expand you. They free you from the narrowness of a single role and open the door to a wider field of contribution. Influence doesn't shrink when you step out, it becomes more distributed, more relational, and more enduring. This week, notice one moment where you influence something without losing authority, using your authority, title, or position. A conversation, a question, a perspective, a presence. Let's just see the influence that remains, even when the role shifts. Then, when we're thinking about a reflective question for the week, consider: where is my influence already expanding beyond my role? Let the answer surprise you. And then, with the ecosystem practice, choose one area of your work and ask, if I wasn't defined by my role here, what would my contribution look like? This is a favorite one for me. If you feel really confined by your role, or perhaps you think that your role is really the field and end all. So, one area of your work and ask, if I wasn't defined by my role here, what could or would my contribution look like? This is how you begin to lead from identity, not position. Your role is temporary, your influence is not. In our next episode, we'll explore the final myth of transition, the belief that being succeeded means being replaced. But succession isn't erasure, it's legacy. I'll meet you there.